Hello, my dear friends. Hello, my dear listeners. I hope you are doing your best to serve your duties in your own circumstances with utmost honesty and love. So, let's start the next part of our journey through the life of our Master Shri Ramkrishna Paramhansa Dev, and in which we are getting acquainted with his gurus. So, in the last episode, we came to know about Totapuri ji. Today we are going to know Bhairavi. So let's start. The Bhairavi Brahmani, Sri Ramakrishna's guide in the Tantrika mode of worship, was present at Dakshineshwar when the master was initiated into sannyasa. A devotee and follower of the dualistic form of worship, she could not appreciate the Advaita philosophy and its non dualistic ideas. Nor did she like the close intimacy of Sri Ramakrishna with Totapuri and even say to him, "Don't be so intimate with that monk. His method is dry intellectualism. You will lose your devotion and love for God if you associate with him." Needless to say that the master paid no heed to these words and persuaded his own course. After Totapuri left Dakshineshwar, the master was determined to remain in a state of absolute identity with Brahman for above all subjective and objective experiences. He directed his activities accordingly. Words cannot describe the state of his mind at this period. He was not conscious of his body and its requirements. In that state, he lost all consciousness of I and mine, or thou and thine. In fact, the very distinction between subject and object, there was neither one nor many, both were engulfed in the crowning realization of the absolute. He passed beyond the realm of relativity. To him, there was neither bondage nor striving for freedom. He lived and moved and had his being in the glory of the ultimate truth. The earnings the urgings of the mind and senses were completely at rest. He remained in a state of peace and bliss, unspeakable, ineffable, a condition of supreme ecstasy in which there was no personality and divinity alone remained. It was an infinite stillness in which self communed with self. Sri Ramakrishna had reached the highest pinnacle of spiritual realization, and all this without the least effort, for his pure mind and for his pure mind was now habituated to dissociating itself from all finite things, which throw a veil, as it were, over the absolute majesty of Brahman, the one without a second. In that state, he remained for 6 months. Referring to this period of his life, the master used to say, "For 6 months at a stretch I remained in that state whence ordinary men can never return, the body falling off after 3 weeks like a sheer leaf. I was not conscious of day and night. Flies would enter my mouth and nostrils just as they do in a dead body, but I did not feel them. The hair became matted with accretions of dust. There was no chance for the body to survive, and it would certainly have perished but for the kind ministrations of a monk who was present at Dakshineshwar at the time. He realized the state of my mind and also understood that this body must be kept alive at any cost, as it was meant to be of immense good to the world. He therefore busily engaged himself in preserving this body. He would bring food regularly to me and try to bring my mind in various ways down to the consciousness of the relative world, even by beating me with a stick. As soon as he found me to be a little conscious, he would press some food into my mouth, only a bit of which reached the stomach, and there were days in which all his efforts would be in vain. 6 months passed in this way. At last, I received the mother's command: remain on the threshold of relative consciousness for the sake of humanity. Then I was laid up with a terrible attack of dysentery and and excruciating pain in the stomach tortured me day and night. It went on for 6 months. Thus only did the mind gradually come down to a lower level and the consciousness of the body. I became a normal man, but before that, at the slightest opportunity, the mind would take a transcendental flight and merge in the Nirvikalpa Samadhi. About this time, an incident happened in the family of Mathur which further strengthened his faith in Shri Ramkrishna. Jagadamba Dasi, Mathur's wife, contracted dysentery, and the physicians declared her case to be hopeless. Mathur was greatly upset by this impending calamity. He hastened to Dakshineshwar to seek the master's counsel and aid. Sri Ramakrishna made him sit by his side and tenderly inquired into the cause of his grief. Mathur said with a sob, not only am I threatened with a terrible personal loss, but if the management of the estate passes into other hands, I shall be unable to continue my service to you. Sri Ramakrishna was touched to the quick at this sore plight and said in an aesthetic mood, don't be afraid. Your wife will recover. These words reassured Mathur and he returned home. To his great relief, he found that the disease had suddenly taken a turn for the better and the crisis was past. Referring to this incident, Sri Ramakrishna afterwards said, from that day, Jagadamba slowly advanced towards recovery and the disease was transferred to this body. As a result of this cure, I suffered for 6 months from dysentery and other complaints. Then he would add, was it for nothing that Mathur served me so faithfully for 14 years? He could serve me so faithfully for 14 years. He could do so only because the mother had shown him various miracles through this body. Because of this, and perhaps also on account of his supreme disregard of the body during his 6 months absorption in the Nirvikalpa Samadhi, he fell a victim to dysentery. Mathur engaged Kaviraj Ganga Prasad Sen for his treatment. Hriday was in constant attendance upon him, but in spite of the disease, his mind was always full of peace and bliss. At the slightest suggestion, it would forget the body and everything about the world and reach a transcendental plane where only the Atman remained. So he must have felt very little of his physical pain, which however often dragged him to the sense plane. Dakshineshwar had at this time an influx of various Vedantist monks with whom he used to discuss the highest philosophy. Needless to say, it would have been impossible for him to take part in these discussions had he been overwhelmed by the disease like an ordinary person. So, my dear friends, today we are going to stop here. We will return back in the next segment. So, till then, be happy, be jolly, and keep praying. Shubhamastu.